The watch turned into the scythe of death, with initial survival time measured in days, then hours, then minutes. Death seemed foretold, counting down every second and minute to the return to the other world. And all of this occurred at a depth of 480 meters below sea level. Despair was evident on the faces of the two sailors. But then, the light at the end of the tunnel appeared. They did not depart in the presence of dolphins, nor did they remain forever in the cold depths of the Atlantic Ocean. That is precisely the plot of the most classic submarine rescue in world history. 84 hours on the clock. How did the struggle for survival unfold? What happened over 50 years ago? Welcome to Conha TV channel. Today, we revisit the world-shocking event of the Pisces 3 submarine in 1973. 84 hours counting down to rescue two victims trapped in a submarine in the Atlantic. That's breathless story, Dawn. To support the team in producing more quality content, let's get into today. This is Roger Mallinson, an engineer working on the Canadian commercial submarine Pisces 3. Accompanying him is Roger Chapman, both installing transatlantic telephone cables for the U.S. Postal Service, about 240 kilometers southwest of Cork Island. Although Chapman had been a submarine sailor for the Royal Navy, operating a submarine was a completely different story. Submarines are typically smaller than submarines, and the Pisces 3 they work on was only 6 meters long, 2 meters wide, and about 3 meters high. Moreover, the type of submarine Chapman was familiar with were large-capacity vessels, often equipped with powerful engines, allowing them to freely enter and exit ports and operate independently in the ocean, while the Pisces 3 submarine had very limited capacity. So how did that affect operations? It's easy to see. Pisces 3 could operate independently for a while but still relied on a mothership for deployment and return. Due to the submarine's cramped size, Mallinson and Chapman had to work very close together. Fortunately, they got along well, so no unexpected conflicts arose. During their 8-hour shift, they moved along the seabed at about 0.8 kilometers per hour. To deploy sediment processing equipment, visibility became extremely limited when mud was stirred up, requiring the pilot to focus intensely to keep the submarine as straight as possible. This work was truly monotonous. For Mallinson, on August 29, 1973, things were worse due to lack of sleep. The previous dive had damaged a part on the Pisces 3, so he had spent 26 hours straight repairing it the day before. During this time, he also performed routine maintenance, including replacing oxygen tanks. The oxygen tank was still half full and, by regulation, not yet due for replacement. However, as if guided by intuition, Mallinson decided to replace it with a new tank anyway. By 9:59 a.m. that day, Mallinson and Chapman's shift was about to end. The Pisces 3 had surfaced. At that moment, Mallinson just wanted to rest, but as they waited for the tow line to lift the submarine onto the mothership, a hatch accidentally opened. Seawater flooded into a sealed compartment of Pisces 3, pushing the submarine back due to increased weight and capsizing it. Though still safe in the control compartment, separated from the flooded part, Mallinson and Chapman were thrown about violently as Pisces 3 sank rapidly. It plunged almost vertically to the seabed, prompting the men to release about 180 kilograms of ballast. But it didn't significantly slow the sinking speed. They shut off all electrical systems and depth gauges as they could shatter from the rapid fall. About 30 seconds after the hatch opened on the surface, Pisces 3 crashed into the seabed at about 65 kilometers per hour. As the submarine capsized and lay on its side, Mallinson and Chapman were trapped at a depth of 480 meters below sea level, surrounded by pitch-black darkness. Time began counting down. The two men's air supply was now limited. A race against time to rescue two lives from suffocation officially began. When everything became eerily silent, one of them took out a flashlight and turned it on. They checked each other and miraculously, both were uninjured. However, around him were fragments of the submarine that had broken apart during a fall or from a violent impact with the seabed. On the surface, all rescue efforts were urgently deployed. But there was a major obstacle to overcome. No one knew where pieces 3 had fallen. During the descent, the buoy line connected to the vessel had snapped. This was a crucial device for locating the sub. When it reached the seabed, the ship settled into a crevice and was partially buried in mud. Less than 30 minutes after the submarine sank, the surface rescue team contacted Marlson and Chapman via telephone. The two reported that they were still okay and were doing everything possible to survive as long as they could. The oxygen supply at this point could only last until the morning of September 1st. Previously, PC-3 was carrying a 72-hour air supply, but the two divers had used 8 hours, so only 66 hours remained. As soon as the call ended, Marlson and Chapman determined that the only thing to do was to conserve as much oxygen as possible. And to do that, they had to minimize all activities. No moving, no talking, almost completely immobile. Therefore, in this sunken ship, they could only lie down, hold each other's hands, and squeeze tightly to indicate that both were still open, as physical condition wasn't. Later, he understood that his only mission at this moment was definitely to survive. At 10:30 a.m. on August 29, 1973, the rescue ship Vickers Venturo in the North Sea was contacted for the rescue operation. This special mission also involved the presence of the British Navy ship HMS Hay Kent, the American Navy submarine Crew 3, and the Canadian Coast Guard ship John Carpet. At 8 a.m. on August 30th, the mothership Vickers Voyager docked at Cork City to pick up submarines Pieces 2 and Pieces B, which had been flown in the previous night to assist in bringing Pieces 3 to the surface. And by now, it had been over 12 hours since Madison and Chapman had the accident. At the bottom of the ocean, both had survived the first night. But the situation gradually became critical. Not only was the oxygen clock ticking away every second, but it also lacked food and the two had only 1 cheese sandwich and 1 can of lemonade. But they decided to save it and try to hold out as long as possible. But glimmer of hope appeared when they discovered condensed steam on the ship's wall. Whenever enough steam condensed, they would lick those droplets. And this amount of water was only enough to moisten their mouths. But as the saying goes, something is better than nothing. When operating the submarine, about every 40 minutes they had to turn on a lithium hydroxide fan to absorb and remove CO2. Now, Madison and Chapman still had to do this, but needed to be even more economical. While waiting for the oxygen bags, both used a timer set for 40 minutes. And when the alarm rang, they would wait a bit longer before turning on the fan. Their purpose was to let CO2 accumulate a little longer to save oxygen. But that made both of them slightly drowsy and sleepy. And so he began to think about their families. Chapman had just gotten married, but Madison already had a wife and 4 young children. He started to feel a bit worried about the situation. In the most dire circumstances, they could only look at the telephone, hoping for the latest news on the rescue efforts. And then, at the end of the day, the phone actually rang. From the other end, a message from Queen Elizabeth was sent to encourage the two trapped divers. Madison and Chapman were very surprised and asked if the Queen really knew about their current predicament. The rescue team then explained that the message came from the crew of a passenger ship named Queen Elizabeth, which was on its way to America but had turned around to participate in rescuing PC-3. The conversation ended with a joke from a rescue team member. "Sorry, guys, it's the Queen." Although the message didn't come from the Queen of England, this mistaken moment was still an interesting one. It helped the two trapped men feel a little less desperate because they understood that everyone on the surface was doing their best to bring them ashore. On the morning of August 31st, 2 days after the fateful work shift, rescue ships arrived at the scene, including PC-2 and PC-5. And by the end of that day, Curry 3 had also arrived. Despite many positive signals, the rest of that day turned out to be a disaster. First, PC-2 was deployed with a special cable. But one of the cables broke, forcing the submersible to return to the mothership for repairs. Next, PC-5 was lowered into the water with the same type of cable and dove to the seabed, but still couldn't find the exact location of PC-3. At this point, PC-5 ran out of power and had to return to the surface to prepare for a second dive. At that time, it was estimated that the two men had only about 18 hours of air left, and their exact location still hadn't been pinpointed. By 1 p.m., PC-5 was ready to dive again. At this moment, a member of the support team came up with a bold plan. This person called Madison and Chapman, asking one of them to sing in the hope that Sonar, the acoustic reflection system, could pick up the sound. After hanging up, Chapman began singing loudly, one song after another, while PC-5 scanned along the seabed. It was an extremely crazy idea, but it worked. The location of PC-3 was actually detected. After approaching PC-3, the crew of PC-5 immediately attempted to attach a cable to the distressed vessel. That's true. However, as soon as it entered the water, it began feeding on water, similar to what happened with PC-3, and had to immediately return to the mothership. A few hours later, at 5:30 p.m., the submersible Curve 3 arrived with the ship John Carpon, but both couldn't dive due to power issues. Repairs for both Curve 3 and PC's True were carried out immediately, but the repair process required time. By midnight, engineers were still doing their utmost to get them operational again. By this time, PC's fifth was also ordered to service the battery charging, leaving the two trapped men feeling extremely desperate. After many hours adrift in the cold darkness, the presence of PC's fifth had given them some comfort. But now, they were once again left alone at the bottom of the ocean. With 72 hours of oxygen nearly depleted and lithium hydroxide for CO2 filtration running out, both were increasingly approaching the worst-case scenario. At 4 a.m. on September 1st, PC's True was finally ready to restart after its second repair. Once again, it was equipped with a special cable with a hook at the end to go down. S True took only a few minutes to locate PC. By 9:40 a.m., Curve 3 also dove down and attached another cable to PC's 3. As soon as they heard they were about to be brought to the surface, the two men took out bread and cheese and lemon water to celebrate. But shortly after, Madison began to worry, because the strongest point of PC's 3 was the area called the forward bridge. However, instead of attaching the cable there, the rescue submersibles hooked onto the aft bridge. Unfortunately, there was no way to access that secure point due to the vessel's position on the seabed. And with the current hook position, if the cable broke, they would be trapped forever or their compartment could rupture. At 10:50 a.m., PC's 3 began to be lifted. It shook violently as it left the seabed but was slowly raised. Madison and Chapman gradually ascended, getting closer to the sunlight they hadn't seen for days. Nevertheless, the difficulties weren't over. After more than an hour of being lifted, another incident occurred. The lifting process had to be paused at a depth of 106 meters to untangle the tow cable. Although everything was quickly resolved, it caused the vessel to shake extremely violently. The rescue team had to temporarily halt the rescue to attach additional cables. Finally, at 1:17 p.m., PC-3 surfaced for the first time after 83 hours underwater. The challenge had ended. The rescue team only had to open the hatch because when the submersible hit the seabed days earlier, its hatch had been damaged and jammed shut. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Time dragged on as the support team poked and pried at the hatch. Finally, after about 30 minutes, a loud bang echoed as if a gun had been fired. Everyone inside and outside PC-3 was startled for a moment, but with that sharp sound, the hatch burst open, letting fresh air and sunlight flood into the vessel. The two men were blinded and had severe headaches, but it was a small price to pay for life. Before exiting the submersible, Madison checked the oxygen tank and found they had only 12 minutes of air left. Immediately after, Madison and Chapman were examined by doctors. Both were dehydrated, and Madison specifically had mild hypothermia, but those were the only effects. Surprisingly, they were in much better condition than imagined. The oxygen supply was only meant to last 72 hours. But their alertness and survival instinct helped them extend their time by 12.5 hours. When the two men emerged from PC-3, they had been trapped together for 84 hours and 30 minutes. This incident created a strong bond between Madison and Chapman. For Madison, Roger Chapman was an excellent companion.
If it had been someone else, they might have panicked. Therefore, if he had to choose someone to go through that situation again, Madison would still choose Chapman. This experience inspired Chapman so much that he dedicated the rest of his life to submarine rescue work and founded a company specializing in this field.
Chapman passed away in 2020 from cancer, while Madison, now over 80 years old, is still alive. To this day, their rescue is still recorded as the deepest underwater rescue ever performed. Everyone needs to believe in miracles, and a miracle truly happened.
The case of Madison and Chapman is just a minority among countless incidents that have occurred throughout history. They were fortunate to be rescued in a breathless scenario, but to be able to wait for rescue, both remained remarkably calm and prolonging their survival.
Hopefully, luck will come to everyone in the world and similar incidents will never happen again. What do you think about the breathless story of PC3? Please share your thoughts with Con Ha.
And before saying goodbye, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to receive the latest videos from Con Ha TV.
For now, we'd like to say goodbye and see you in the next videos.
If the veil stirred, subscribe and meet the next encounter.